So what do you think the biggest economic story of 2025 was?
It has to be tariffs and trade friction, and which of course feeds into the question of uncertainty, both in terms of where things currently are in the Canadian economy, obviously, but also like investment decisions over the longer term and where things are going to end up.
Okay, so you previously called the Canadian government's debt position unsustainable and shocking. You told Bloomberg yesterday that you recalled speaking in committee meetings and worrying MPs weren't paying attention, which prompted you to use the stronger language. I was just wondering if you think the MPs are listening now.
I think they're definitely listening. From my perspective, the words themselves ended up becoming a distraction from the underlying technical factors. So in September, we published for the first time, in my memory, and I've been here for 17 years, a medium-term forecast for the debt-to-GDP ratio, which the government themselves has said it's the best indicator of financial sustainability and essential for sustaining Canada's AAA credit rating. But we published it going up over a 5-year period of time, and that was without including about $100 billion of spending every year. And were one to include that $100 billion of additional spending, the debt to GDP ratio would have been going up by a lot more. It was definitely something that raised concerns regarding fiscal sustainability, and it's definitely an inflection point for parliamentarians, and both for parliamentarians who are new, just coming out of the election, who might, obviously, debt to GDP, it's kind of a conceptual issue. You're new to Parliament Hill, you might not be familiar with it. And also for other parliamentarians who have been around for a while, we had like 8 meetings that morning with various parliamentarians prior to the committee meeting. And for those parliamentarians, I think almost all of them have been around on the Hill for a while. It was clear to me that they thought it was, this is a run-of-the-mill economic and fiscal outlook. And trying to explain to them, no, it's not. Actually, there are some really fundamental differences. So the government can definitely borrow additional money on financial markets. At the same time, from a fiscal anchors perspective, which is code language for fiscal management, when you bump up against one of these things, it's usually a signal that potentially what you had in mind regarding how you manage things, it's not quite working out as anticipated. And it is a really challenging fiscal situation overall. Anyway, and I think parliamentarians definitely get it now.
How would you describe the economy in one word in 2025?
Exciting.
Exciting. Why?
Oh, why?
Yeah.
It's exciting because from a geeky perspective, every time that we were looking at something, every time that something new came up, having to ask the question, like, okay, how do we model that? Where have we seen it before? What does the research look like? Do we need to model, does our existing model work? Is it calibrated in the right way? That makes it interesting. And there were a lot of surprises as well, right? So just in terms of the data coming out of StatCan, the revisions, how often have you seen, like, on looking at the trade data from StatCan, the monthly trade data, how often have you seen at the bottom of a monthly data release saying, yeah, we're uncertain what quality these data are, so please use them prudently because they implemented a new customs system, so a new IT system. Major revisions around GDP as well, related to trade, but also related to other factors. Yeah, like from a geeky perspective, and again, like having been around here for a long time, and most recently having spent 12 months responsible for the economic and fiscal outlook, the first one I was responsible for in fall 2024, it's like, here's the model, here's the updated data, this is what it comes out with. What do we want to play around with and retool ever so slightly? And then all of a sudden we're going into 2025 and it's, we've never seen this before. So how are we going to approach this and what's reasonable? Yeah. Hopefully things are less exciting in 2026.
Okay, so what is the one thing Canadians should be watching for in 2026?
The one thing I'm looking at on a daily basis is the labor market. And it's the labor market because and I think it's interesting for all Canadians because, of course, the major source of income for most folks is their job. or the job they used to have and now the pension, the money they set aside, but definitely their job if you're between the ages of 15 and 64. The labor market has been surprisingly resilient outside of those trade-exposed sectors. So it'll be interesting to see both on the demographic side. So the government has made some big moves on the immigration side. So it'll be interesting to see how those filter through the labor market. It'll be interesting to see for those trade-exposed sectors how quickly the people in those sectors, when their jobs are affected, they're currently affected, they're probably going to be affected more, how quickly they're going to be able to pivot. The one stat that I look at every single month is unemployment 15 to 24, and like we're down to 406,000, but it's still 406,000 kids, right? Like who want full-time work, who can't get full-time work. I think outside of everything that people do around housing and other issues of affordability and other types of supports, it's got to start with the labor force, right?
When will the Bank of Canada cut interest rates again?
I think the bank has called it perfectly, primarily because that's what our forecast indicated, that this is it. And the next interest rate change we're looking at is probably, like for the overnight rate, is probably an increase, at least according to our forecast.
And what is keeping you up at night?
On the fiscal and financial management side by the government of Canada. And the concern on my part, again, whether it's like a 634-page budget implementation bill in C-15 or switching out the fiscal anchors without any meaningful discussion, the IMF coming back last week and saying, actually, you should probably switch them back. The concern for myself is there's a lot of change happening around some of the basic elements of financial management, and Parliament isn't being given enough time to discuss them in a meaningful way. And the real risk in the longer term is, even if you like the changes that are happening now, if there isn't a lot of scrutiny or a lot of meaningful discussion, you might not like the changes that somebody else in the future decides to make without a lot of discussion or a lot of debate. The other consideration is, and something we've seen, I think, in most democracies, is if you want to implement substantial change, you need buy-in. And not only from parliamentarians, but also from the public. And you need to bring people along with you. And when you make these major decisions really quickly without engaging in discussions, and I've said this previously, without being transparent around changes to your fiscal architecture. So why you're doing it, what are the benefits of the costs, and what the impacts are, it risks politicization of what should be very boring, accounting and finance. But that's really what concerns me.
So what is your general read on the economy in 2026 then? Are you hopeful, or are we just headed for the same uncertainty?
Oh, well, I think as time passes, for better or for worse, the uncertainty is going to resolve itself. And certainly we ended up having a really great surprise last week with the GDP numbers that were released by StatCan, and especially like looking at the historical revisions, right? So the GDP going back to 2022 was revised upward substantially. So the economy was actually in much better shape than anyone anticipated or anyone thought going into the trade friction. And then the Q3 numbers, so the most recent numbers, the numbers for the most recent quarter were also more positive than anticipated. It's not perfect. That said, anytime you end up having an upside surprise, you gotta take it, right? You gotta take it. So I think that going forward, things will resolve themselves, especially on the CUSMA side. So the transition will take place. It's the nature of the capitalist system. People will shift jobs, firms will shift investment across the economy. There's going to be growth in some areas, potentially less growth or shrinkage in others. And once that transition happens, the Canadian economy is well positioned. The governor of the Bank of Canada made the point that we're going to have growth. It's not going to feel great. I still go back to, we're going to have growth. Right? So we're going through a period of time where most economists who look at the Canadian economy, notwithstanding the challenges in specific sectors, there is steady overall growth that should be building over time. So that's something to be hopeful. That's a good reason to be hopeful. But that's really what concerns me.